tendency to do that with books because I only absorb about 20% of what I'm listening to or what I'm reading. Reading or listening to makes no difference for me. I only absorb it. I basically, my brain, I don't know if it's deficient, probably, but I read it or listen to it, and then I have to spend about 24 hours digesting it. My brain is processing it. And then out of whatever I read, I got about 20% is locked in. And so if I read or listen to something 5 times, that's 20%, 24 hours goes by. 20%, 24 hours. Eventually I've got it all, right? And the way you know that is because the second time I read or listened to the book, I found new stuff. I mean, a lot of stuff in the beginning, some stuff in the middle, whatever, I remembered. But I always found new stuff. And on the second time, I found less new stuff. I remembered some things, right? On the third time, I found even less new stuff that almost like I hadn't heard before, or maybe it rang a bell, but I didn't really know about it. But as it was going through, and the third time, the fourth time, I'm remembering more of what I am listening to, and there's less new stuff. And by the time it got to the fifth time, there was only a little bit left, and it was kind of toward the end of the book. And so literally that's how I've mapped it out over time. When you read a book for fun, you don't have to do that kind of stuff. But when you're reading a book that's important, that you want to remember the lessons taught by the book, read it 5 times. And maybe your brain's better than mine. It's entirely possible. It's most likely the case, with most people, in my opinion. I know a bunch of people that are on a very strange political side that I don't know what's going on with their brain. It's a psychology thing, I think, not a brain limitation thing. Whatever, it's all good. But 5 times is what I recommend. The other book was called, and it's not about health, and it's called The E-Myth Revisited. If you were to read 2 books in your lifetime that could change your life, first off, I'm not religious, but I did the same thing when I was a kid. But by the time I was 15, I had read my father got me an NIV Bible when I was, 10 or 11. Because I told him I was reading the Bible, but I couldn't make head or tails of some of these, thys, and thous, and all that. And he wanted, of all the kids in the family, it was 5 of us, I was the Tasmanian devil. And so he wanted me to read the Bible. He was very Christian. Dang, it's almost done. And got me an NIV Bible. So everything was like common, up-to-date speak. And I read that thing about 5 times by the time I was 15. Okay. And then after that, I read it again, probably at 17. And I absorbed a little more information of the stuff that I just wasn't interested in the beginning times. But he had given me some advice when I was 12 years old because I told him I wanted to stop going to church because it didn't make sense to me. And I laid it out, actually. It's funny, as I look at it as an adult, as an older adult even, for that matter, I look at it and I remember how I laid it out for him, and shit, man, I could have been a litigator. I laid it out for him in a debate argument form. And I kept it, emotionless. But I kept it passionate. How do you say emotionless and passionate? When I say emotionless, there was no angst in it. I was discussing, and we had lots of discussions, he and I was discussing it with him, and I pitched my case basically that the people at church, they were Christians on one day of the week for the most part. There were a little handful of people that my dad knew that lived it. And the rest of everybody, I mean, even including my minister, which is really the coup de grace that got me, and it's why my dad let me stop going to church, because that was kind of like I say, the coup de grace of my argument, was that it was a Baptist church in the state of Oregon, and the minister, who was a young fella, he couldn't have been more than 40 years old, had a wife and 2 or 3 kids, beautiful woman, gorgeous little kids. They seemed to have a perfect life. But he got caught having sex with pretty much, half the women in the congregation. the people that were like homebound or whatever, he was going to visit them and, things like that. Anyway, he got one of them became emotional and narked on him, which was great because it told everybody in that damn church that you got to think for yourself. It told me, you got to think for yourself. You want to know what's in that book? Read the book. Don't ask that guy because he does not know. He does not live it. He doesn't feel it, It's not important to him, which is why he was, doing the Higgly Wiggly with every woman that he could figure out how to get there, And my father was so disgusted with that whole story that he, that at this time I presented it well. He said, I understand. I said, hey, Dad, the people that are in church seeming like they're Christians, when we get outside to the potluck later, or when people are chatting in the parking lot, they're talking about each other. Like the women are all, talking about this woman not doing something right, and that woman not doing something right, and that woman's not dressing their kids right. And, I said, it's not, they don't notice me because I was a kid, they don't think I'm listening, and I wasn't standing right there going, but I said, the stuff that I'm reading in the Bible is not exhibited by 99% of the people that I'm seeing at church, and I don't think I'm getting a good, experience out of that. And I didn't know how to articulate that I was becoming jaded, at the time, but he knew it. He got it. He was an extremely intelligent man. And with a really sneaky IQ, because he appeared one way, pretty clearly appeared one way, and he liked playing it up. But he was a very deep thinker and had a great memory and great for conversation, things like that, and read constantly, like forever, his whole life. He saw his first TV when he was 17, so all he ever did was read or go outside and play with frogs. And he was very, very smart, very well read and all that. Anyway, coffee's done. In case you don't know, there are some people like from Great Britain. When your coffee's done, it should look like this. Hold it up in the window. I've never bothered to do this, but like on purpose. But you hold it up at the window. You see the light behind it, okay? It should be this dark. It should not be lighter than this. It should be this dark or darker, okay? And I like a medium roast, which means I don't like it as dark as it can get. Some people drink a light roast even, and I used to. And I drink coffee throughout the day. Oh, by the way, I drink tea too. See all those teas? Yeah, it's mostly herbal, but I do have a couple of. That one right there is a British tea that my mom liked, and it's just kind of comical. Then also my Yorkshire, which is kind of something I would drink at breakfast if I were to drink tea that day. And then when I get down here, I have a couple of, my wife's favorite tea is Earl Grey, and I like this English breakfast tea, even though I'm not as big on the brand. They're still good. This is iced tea, which I don't make a ton. My wife really likes it, but she's not here right now. And the rest of them are just all herbals and for different things. And I drink them at different times and stuff like that. Like if I'm not feeling good or who knows what. Sometimes in the evening I'll have a big cup of tea, like in this cup right here. And it'll usually be something like chamomile. And the teas that I have that are empty, this is, by the way, really good. If you ever want to try it smells like blueberry cobbler. And it's Celestial Seasonings. There's no fake stuff. There's no chemical stuff. It's just a really good quality tea, and it's called Blueberry True Blueberry. So that's one of my favorites. I just drank the last one of those this morning. And then I have a regular Sleepy Time, and this is my Sleepy Time Extra, and it's chamomile and some things like that. But actually, it doesn't make you sleepy like a sleeping pill by any means. And I set those there on my stove to remind me when I go to the store next that I need to replace those particular ones. So, or if I'm ordering it from Amazon or something like that. So anyway, on with my glasses. I use Meta glasses. I just decided because I'm about to start driving semi. I'm about to start driving truck, lorries, if you're from England, and it's against the law to touch an electronic device, which I still to this day don't quite understand how it is not illegal to pick up a CB mic, you know, and then everything else is illegal so you're not supposed to be allowed to operate a telephone like a cell phone. This is still the last of my tea. Ooh. And it smells so good. Tea bag. But it smells like blueberry cobbler, and it tastes like blueberries. So I don't know why they haven't made blackberry. And I think I have a suspicion because the blackberries everywhere else in America, there's like 2 or 3 different varieties that I know of everywhere else. They don't have as much of a flavor as they do where I'm from in Oregon. The blackberries that grow wild in Oregon are much sweeter and show you how I do everything. They're much sweeter, and I think that would make better tea. So one day I will try it. And blackberries in the state of Oregon, like Western Oregon, everywhere. I mean, they're pretty much considered a weed, except that people like blackberries so much that nobody wants to eradicate them. I can't tell you how many hours as a kid I spent chopping them back and trying to get rid of them for my father, you know, because my father told me to do it, kind of thing. So yeah, now, so my house, in case you don't know this channel, my house at the moment is really, really empty at least the downstairs, and I'm getting ready to redo the floors, the hardwood floor. Now the hardwood floor itself is from 1907, so it's really, really old. When my mother originally bought this house, it was like, I don't know, 29 years. Well, she had it for 29 years, and over all those years, I didn't live here, but I worked on her house for her occasionally, doing lots of stuff. Over time, I transformed this house from what it used to look like, and it's unrecognizable now compared to what it was when she first bought it. It looked very, even though she bought it in the 90s, it looked extremely early 70s, you know. And I mean, to give you an idea, the basement is, you know, the walls are concrete. That was covered in orange shag carpet. I promise you. I don't think they make that anymore. I mean, if they do, it's a real specialty outfit, but no, they thought it would make it look warmer, maybe look prettier or something like that. So they glued orange shag carpet to the concrete walls of the basement, and I helped tear that down. And my little brother Jerry and one of our cousins, who shall remain nameless because they have not stayed friendly with the rest of my family, which is interesting. Maybe it's my family hasn't stayed friendly with that part of the family. I don't know. I don't understand how that all works. It was something about religion. Well, it started with when my father died in 1988. I was 19. My mom was only 42. She still had 2 kids at home, raising 2 kids at home. And suddenly now they had been those cousins had been like a couple that my parents hung out with quite often. They didn't have any other friends that they hung out with. It was either the family or those cousins, and they had a really good relationship, so everybody thought. Close cousins in this part of the country. And we had moved to this part of the country from the West Coast, which we had some close cousins from a different, a little farther removed. Well, actually, in a way, the cousins here are farther removed. The cousins there were closer, like a sibling of my mother. Anyway, the ones here, when my father died, instantly started treating mom like a third wheel. And so she had no friends. She had nobody really to hang out with. And she told me, I talked to her on the phone quite a bit because, I stayed around. I took care of a bunch of stuff, but eventually I had to get going. I already had tons of plans that just got totally ruined by that whole surprise, that nasty surprise. And they stayed ruined for the rest of my entire life. But I readjusted, changed gears, did other things. And when I was on the West Coast, when I was in New Orleans, then I was on the West Coast, I would talk to my mom pretty regularly. She never dated again. She went on one date. She was a teacher. She became a teacher she was a stay-at-home mom her whole life, raised 5 kids. And my dad never liked the idea of her having a job. He had a really good job as an electrician, a union job, and so it paid, really good money. I mean, it was like 20-something bucks an hour in the 70s. So, really good job. And she never had to work, for the money. We had plenty of that, even though they wasted it like crazy. And they had 5 kids that sort of just evaporated it. But she had no real skills other than whatever she learned in high school and things that she picked up along the way just by raising kids, right? Well, when my father died, she went through some real difficult times, trying to basically moved from her place in Iowa to a place that they had, an area we used to live in the state of Oregon. And then moved from there to England because they had gone there once, mom and dad, on a vacation. And they both loved it and all this. And then eventually came back to Iowa. And when we were talking one time, it turned out she was basically trying to find my father, One of my father's old friends was dying of cancer, and he wasn't going to leave. Well, actually, he died. She was in contact with him before he died, but he died of cancer. And he didn't leave anything to his children because they were all a bunch of assholes. They cared about his money, which he had plenty of. But his wife had died a few years before that of cancer, and he was dying of cancer now. And so he decided he's not going to permit his children to sit there and become enemies with each other because they all wanted a piece of what he had earned his whole life. And so he left every bit of it to the Cancer Society of America. And he had a sailboat that he built himself, a ferrous cement sailboat, I helped build one ferrous cement sailboat when I was a kid. And oh my God, what a job that is. And what an amazing lesson that taught me about engineering. But he left everything to the Cancer Society, and one of the children was the executor of the will. He was in charge of having to sell that sailboat along with any other assets he left, at home or whatever, that kind of stuff. And that kid was such a dick that he sold everything he could possibly sell for as little as was permitted by probate or whatever it is, the legal body that governed how his stuff was going to be liquidated, and then the money would be going to the Cancer Society. So this boat that was probably a $200,000 boat easily sailboat, beautiful sailboat, live aboard. My mom heard about it and bought it for $20,000 because that was the least amount he was allowed to sell it for. She didn't need a sailboat. That was my dad's dream, you know. And she was looking for him everywhere she could remember him ever liking or wanting to be or visiting or living. Thank God she didn't move to Mississippi or something. But and it took her a while to figure out, and all of her insurance money to figure out that that he wasn't anywhere anymore, you know. Somehow in her head he didn't die in her presence. He died in my presence, and we were about 3.5 hours away from where she was. She didn't even see his body because they had to perform an autopsy, and she didn't want to necessarily see his body. And so by the time she would have seen him, he was cremated, you know, which is what he wanted and which is what she was okay with. You know, that's what he wanted. In her mind, I think she didn't fully accept that he was actually gone. She said that she kept on having dreams that, you know, she would get a call from him or a letter from him or find out that actually he never died and he was hiding, you know, and that this was he was being aided by people, me included, you know, because I was there when he died. I performed CPR on him along with a bunch of other people. I only did it for a couple minutes because everybody was there, you know. Anyway, everybody but her. And money does weird things to people, and grief does weird things to people. And that was a great lesson for me. She was an incredibly intelligent person. She's been passed now when she was like 76, I think. I have a weird memory about that kind of stuff because I have a habit of suppressing things extremely well around grief. I can absorb it when I'm dealing with it, you know, and I stay unemotional for the most part and I maybe learned that when my dad died because things had to be taken care of. And it was my opinion at the time, I was 19, I was in the military, and it was my opinion at the time that if I just stopped juggling, if I stopped watching the road, that my mother and the kids would be, you know, left to fend for themselves, and it wouldn't have been good, kind of a thing. And it was important that I did that, you know, because it accomplished a lot of things. I don't talk about that because I don't like to. But at the same time, no matter how many people tell me what the date was that my dad died, I cannot remember. I know what time of the year it was because of some events that were happening at that time that I was involved with. And I know I really had a really bad cold for, you know, in the weekend before he died because it was really cold out, you know, and we were working in it. But it's funny how I repressed that information. This video has taken a really weird turn. It was just making coffee. Anyway, I'm going to get off that subject because I don't even like it. I don't know why I even brought it up. I don't even know how I brought it up. If you can remember how I brought it up, please don't tell me. I was almost going to tell you to tell me, and I'm like, I want you guys to comment, really. Like and subscribe, please, because it helps me. And then if you do like this material, you can see it, more of it. I'm going to take these glasses off, they're irritating. Anyway, you get to see more of it. It pops up, you don't have to search it out. And the other thing is, eventually, supposedly, if enough people subscribe, then YouTube will give me money or something. It's all, I've heard of it, but it really doesn't exist in my mind until it actually happens. And if it does, I'll tell you all about it. I'll tell you how much it was. I'll tell you the check. I'll show you the check, whatever. I'll teach you how to do it, you know, because I think that's the next big thing in work is be an entrepreneur and to be a creator, you know, until we can't distinguish AI from human beings, which I'm sure it'll be any minute now because it's pretty damn close now. but people and the way they do things is entertaining. You know, the fact that at times I can be the most resourceful human being, have moments of clarity, wisdom and clarity that make you think I've lived on a mountaintop with a big long white beard for a while. And then other times I am just a pet monkey. I am a blithering, I don't throw poo. I don't like the idea of that even. So that's never gonna happen. I'm not even one of those people that want to I don't have a dog, but I don't want to put a plastic bag on my hand and pick up dog poop. I don't want to touch that shit. Literally, that shit. So don't worry, I'm never going to throw poo. Pet monkey, yeah, but I'm not going to throw poo. I told my wife when we started hanging out again, we were friends since 1985, but I told my wife when we started hanging out again in like 2010, and then we got kind of, you know, we were just friends. We got kind of romantically involved in about 2011. And I warned her, I knew me, really bad ADHD, and so I can never think of one thing for longer than, I don't know, a few seconds. It's like, squirrel, you know, and then my mind's on something else. That's all really entertaining and stuff, like a pet monkey, and that's exactly the descriptor I used, but it gets old, okay? Having a pet monkey would be so fun. I've always wanted to have a pet monkey, but then there's the care factor, you know? But in related to this point I'm making is that after a while, you just don't have any energy left to keep watching that little fucker do his stupid shit. And that is me. I am the proverbial pet monkey. And trust me, it gets fucking old. It gets old to me. I can't do a thing about it though. I don't get to choose if I keep on watching because I'm that guy. ADHD people, first off, I've never met a stupid ADHD person. If you have ever seen a stupid ADHD person, please comment and describe this to me. Because I've literally never heard of a stupid ADHD person. I've always wondered, is it possible for a really stupid person to be also an ADHD person? It's like schizophrenic people. I've never known a schizophrenic person that was stupid. I've known lots of schizophrenic people, but I've never known one that was stupid. That's to me a fascinating subject because schizophrenia is just all psychology, all medicine is fascinating to me. But okay, so it's been about the right amount of time, about 29 minutes. So I try to keep them 30 minutes or less, which is not what I did a few days ago with the hour long, whatever, and 45 minutes long or whatever. I just had some shit to say, and so I wanted to say it. But now I'm going to keep it to where it's supposed to be. Sorry. Mustache. People without a mustache, you don't know. Mustache hairs get your nose. I live in eastern Iowa, right on the Mississippi River. It's that way, like 5 blocks. And my channel is called Still Working It Out, comma, Life on the Road. Still Working It Out, Life on the Road. So if you want to see more of my stuff, you can find it that way, or you can like and subscribe. That helps. But the most important thing is comment. Tell me your name. Tell me where you're from. I've been almost everywhere in America, and I've been other places, you know, over the years. Kind of like the ADHD thing. I've never had, luckily for humanity, I've never had kids. So I've never had to buckle down, you know, and have the same job for 30 years kind of thing and all that. And so I've gotten to treat my life like, sort of like a vacation, you know, where that if I want to do something different, I did it. If I had a job for 6 months and I liked it, I stayed. But But after about a year would be about the time when I'm thinking about going to a different job, because I've now learned that job. There's no such thing as being an expert in a thing like that. You have to spend 10,000 hours at something to be an expert in it. There's things that I've done in my life that I'm an expert in, but had nothing to do with what I did for work, you know. I am an expert marksman, which when I was 17, when in the Army, I out of the 85 guys in my platoon, 2 of us shot expert. You know, there's 3 different levels, and expert's the highest level. And it's just because I grew up in the woods, you know. First with a BB gun, then with a 22, and I got to be one of those Daniel Boone types, you know. I could shoot anything. I was a great marksman as a child. So anyway, again, squirrel. So like and subscribe. Comment, please, just comment. Tell me to fuck off. Tell me I look idiotic. You can even tell me something constructive, like if you want me to, you know, dye my hair purple. I might. You never know. You never know about me, man. For real. There's a lot of things you don't know about me. Ask questions. I'll answer honestly. I'm not that smart. I'm not smart enough to really lie. If I want to tell somebody that's something that's not true, or if I don't want to tell something that is true, I'll just change the subject. That's a lifelong thing, sidestepping the conversation. But I sum up all my videos like this. I try to anyway. Don't give up. Don't give up. 80% in America, 80% of all new businesses fail in the first year. And that is because people gave up. First off, they didn't plan it well and stuff. But in the end, the only reason you had to quit a business is you weren't making money, and it was dragging you down emotionally. And 80% of all people in the first year give up. Now, there's a way to do it without giving up. And this is in life too. Work the problem. Why are you not making money at a business when, oh my God, everybody wants to give it away so bad? I've had businesses where that I didn't know what the fuck I was doing business-wise, but I did great work because I'm a nice guy, you know. I don't want to rip anybody off. I'm honest. If I don't know how to do a particular thing, first off, I won't tell people I can. And if somebody insists that I do this particular thing because for some reason they like me, I will find out how to do it. And I have gone to great lengths in that particular area. I know how to do a lot of things. The ADHD thing is good, but I've had a zillion jobs. I had one job for 4 years, one ever. And I've had a few jobs that were for 2 years, and most of those, I had another job at the same time. Basically because I don't like to sit. I don't like to do nothing. It's like a stake through my heart kind of a thing. And so there's been plenty of times in my life where I worked 16, 18 hours a day just because I had 2 full-time jobs. And I learned a lot of things during those things. But for the most part, most of the jobs I've ever had in my life lasted 1 year. Because at 1 year, I was getting antsy to change. If I really loved a job, I kept it, but then I got another job on top of it. One time, and I'm just going to sound stupid, but I had 5 jobs at one time. Now, most of that was really part-time. One of those for sure was all mine, so I could choose all the hours. I could choose all the whatever. You know, it could be an hour a day. It could be 4 hours a particular day when I'm off from the other jobs, that kind of thing. But at one time, I had 5 jobs at once because I am just an idiot. I just can't sit still. How in the hell am I fat? Look at this. You would think I'd burn all that calories off, but I made it my business to eat all the worst stuff for so long, which is why my brother probably sent me that book, How Not to Die. And it changed me. It changed my life. That book, How Not to Die, and The E-Myth Revisited. Those two books changed my life. That's how I brought that whole subject up about the Bible. That's what brought me. This is how ADHD works. The Bible, then my father, then da-da-da-da-da, down the road. If you want to live a good life, I'm not religious. I don't believe in and I've read everything I can find about every fucking religion on earth that I can find. You know, you wouldn't know it because of the way the living room's all empty now, but I have books and books and books and books, and 90% of them are about religion. You know, the Quran, you know, all the different Eastern religions, ancient religions, a couple that don't exist anymore, but there were still books about them. And I found really interesting similarities. If you ever want a comparison to what I've, 35 years of reading voraciously, but you wanted video form, which is, the crib notes, but it's actually extremely well done, is look up Zeitgeist. I think there's something else to it, but it's if you type in like Google Zeitgeist, where can I watch the video Zeitgeist, you will see something extremely interesting. A lot of really huge zealots will tell you that's the devil trying to make you. It's not. It's somebody did what I'm doing, what I've been doing my whole life out of just curiosity. Mine is just out of curiosity. And the other one was, why am I compelled to go against the grain of all of society? My whole family. My grandmother one time asked me when I was 12 years old, who I've seen like 4 times in my life. Sweet old lady. Racist as hell. But she thought that was correct because of where she was from. She said, Stevie, are you saved? And I'm such an idiot. I said, well, Grandma, I'm kind of more of an agnostic. And she goes, oh no! And I should have never told her that. Yeah, so anyway, I went against the grain of my whole family and was honest, and I told people as soon as I figured it out, that I don't think this is correct. I think this is all man-made. I understand why that it's man-made. There's psychology. It's a never-ending curiosity factor, My father, though, said something to me one time that was brilliant. We had many, many, many theological discussions, debates even, where that I would ask him, how come all these different books in the Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, all that stuff, how come they all have these basically separate perspectives of a similar event, that's supposedly the same event, but they would tell them in different ways. And this one dude told his whole thing in the third person, which nobody else did that. And then I found out that this shit was all written like hundreds of years after Jesus was murdered. He was an actual person. I mean, his life, his existence was cross-referenced by Roman documents. He was an actual person. And to my little brother who said, "Oh, the J didn't even exist back then," no, of course not. You have to look that up and be interested in it. Find out how language changes over time. Yeah, the name Jesus didn't exist back then, and he went by another guy named Yahshua, even though his name started with a J. It was Yahshua. But anyway, he existed. He was an actual person, and he was put to death by the state. And so that all exists. He's an historical person. Now, the stories about what happened to him in his whole life, who knows what they are? Have you ever heard of the game Telephone? Where somebody whispers in the first person's ear a sentence, kind of like a tiny little story about something. And then you're supposed to pass that to the next person secretly. And they pass it to the next person secretly. And 7 people down the road, and you ask them what the story was about, and oh my God, it is so different than what the first person's story was. So if that only takes 7 people, there's absolutely no way that those stories were passed along for like 100 years, verbally only, not written. Then they were written. It went on, it was a verbal thing, kind of like Native Americans did with their stories, because they didn't have regular writing. And then, so 100 years goes by, and then it was written down, and then it still wasn't kept in one place. Scribes, local scribes, somebody, every little group, every little town, every whatever you want to call them, had at least one person that did scribing. And so they would look at this copy of what somebody else wrote down, and then they would just copy it 100%. Now, that's all well and good, but we even know, even when it's not a person involved, even when we ever using a copying machine, has anybody heard the term a copy of a copy? The first copy is perfect. The second copy is The third copy is damn near unreadable, So when we got these scribes making copies of copies, right? It's really common, and it's been well documented in literature, how they made really common mistakes. They misspelled words that then were later interpreted, had to be interpreted, whether that was just a misspelling or was that actually this other word that's pretty close. And then that doesn't even count, go into the language differences. Many of these groups, towns, whatever, they spoke a similar language to each other, but they basically developed their own language that was off of that language, and so they had their own way of speaking. It's just like in America, how the Southern accent not only has its Southern accent, but it's got lots of Southern slang. And if you don't know what those things mean, you will not understand the story, And so anyway, there's a whole, I actually wrote a paper about this that I researched out. I do too much of that. But my dad told me the best piece of advice I think he ever told me in my entire life was, if you read the Bible and if things are confusing, whatever, he said, go by the red letters. Because in the NIV Bible that he gave me, in the common NIV Bible, red letters in the Bible are what Jesus said. Now, again, this is supposedly what Jesus said. The people that wrote this shit down, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, totally not who heard these things. The church did all kinds of crazy stuff about, they decided they'll put, this is the book of Matthew. They never met that guy. This is the book of John. They never met that guy. The whole thing about how did Jesus meet these guys like Matthew, Luke, John in the Middle East? They didn't. That's all fictitious. Look that up sometime on AI. Ask them to explain it to you. I've done literally thousands of hours of research on that kind of stuff, and it's very, very interesting. Anyway, but the piece of advice I took from my father was, no matter how much is written in that book, Old Testament, New Testament, all that stuff, the only things that you really need to pay attention to are in the red letters. Now, was Jesus a deity? Is that the actual shit he said? Who knows? But by the time my father had given me that NIV book, he probably knew the whole damn Bible in the these, thys, and those, context. He was a very religious man, but he wasn't the wrong kind of religion, which is what is common today. Zealots and people that have followed not Billy Graham but Frank Graham. That's two opposite sides of a coin right there. And my father was a big fan of Billy Graham. Give you an idea. And even though I read the book over and over and over, the red letters are what shaped who I am. And bits of wisdom that, like I say, I don't know where they came from. Kindness, generosity, patience, The whole if somebody slaps you in the face, turn the other cheek thing. I have never been one of those kinds of people. Okay, I'm almost more like a Muslim naturally. If somebody were to slap me in the face, I would beat the shit out of them. You know, that's my natural state. Now, if I had the right amount of caffeine that day or something like that, I would possibly, depending on who they were, have patience with them. You know, there have been plenty of times where I have reacted very calmly and realized that whoever it is having a very bad day, and by beating the fuck out of them, I wouldn't have been helping them. In fact, I would have been doing the same thing that their father used to do, which is why they wound up the way they did. And so instead, you know, if it was possible, I backed up. Or if it wasn't possible to back up, instead I wrapped them up, you know. It's a wrestling, Aikido type stuff where that you can just pluck their hand out of the air while they're trying to hit you and turn it the right way to where that you basically are instantly behind them, and you sort of just give them a big bear hug. They can't move their arms. They can't really do anything to you anymore, and you're watching for their feet and the whole bit. And I've held people there for 5 minutes where they're like, hey, listen, I could break your fucking nose, I could break your jaw, I could kill you with my hands if I needed to. And that is not a lie. But, and this is me telling them, but you don't need that. This is not going to help you. It won't solve anything. You just need to calm down. I'm giving you a break right now. I'm doing what my father would have wanted me to do. I'm doing what Jesus said to do. Which in America, when you say that to somebody, that most people I have ever met are Christians. Even Jewish people that I know who don't believe that Jesus was a deity, and I don't believe that Jesus was a deity either. But they instantly know who Jesus is and what he said. Jewish people do, for sure. And if I've got them in that situation, I spent all those years bouncing in bars and everything else. If I've got them in that situation, they're realizing, first off, this guy could have fucked me up. Because once I have them there, I don't care how tough they thought they were, they realized instantly that we were not a match that way. And they went on their way. But it was all because of those red letters. And I absolutely 100% believe in that. Not that Jesus was a deity, not that, you know, you have to follow the 10 Commandments or you're going to go to hell and fire. None of that exists. I don't think heaven exists. I don't think hell exists. I don't think that there's a system where that if you follow the rules that you'll wind up in a mansion in heaven. I don't think any of that exists. It's a mathematical equation. And I'm no math guy either, but I understand big numbers. If you're a good person to strangers, to people that you care about, to everybody, that spreads. And it's kind of like how people talk about karma. I think karma is a mathematical equation also. When you do good things everywhere around you, that spreads. If you do bad things everywhere around you, that spreads. If I'm in a room of 100 people and I start doing bad things, eventually it's going to come back around to me where somebody's going to do something bad to me because I started something. You know, I started a trend, and the trend becomes popular, and bad things eventually happen to me. And if I do something good, and then something next, and then something next in that same room, eventually people are going to be smiling. You call that karma all you want to. I don't discount anybody's belief, you know. Christians, Muslims, Jews, Judaism, Islam, Hindus. you know. I don't know for sure that Buddha existed. I tracked down that Jesus existed in history. Buddha probably existed because otherwise there'd be just no way that it became such a big thing. And it sounds to me like he was a peaceful, happy individual who preached that. That's good karma right there, because it's still around and much bigger than it ever was before. Islam, if it was practiced the way it was originally taught, people wouldn't be messing with the Islamics. You know, that's for one thing. But at the same time, people wouldn't be, I don't think people would be killing each other as much. That's not a conflict of religions. That's a conflict of the rich and the poor. The rich meaning landowners who think they're in charge of everything, and they erect fake borders because they own that. That's their territory. And then when another rich guy with his people has the same opinion, but then he doesn't feel like he has enough land, and let's go take it from those guys. And well, those people don't care about that rich guy's thing. So let's say that they're against our religion, even if that's not true. That's how religions have shaped over the years, especially Judaism and Islam have been formed after, from the beginning. They changed, they morphed until they started fighting, and then they've been fighting for thousands of years. And you know, one gets in power and does their best to commit genocide on the other, and then eventually that fails, and then it's a cycle. It just keeps on going. You know, right now Christians in America, Christians in the West in general, are trying to do the same thing to everybody else. Judaism's just trying to survive, and they're also doing the same thing to Palestine, which is an actual thing. You know, somebody told me, who I admire and love, that, and they're a new Jewish person, that Palestine wasn't a thing. And I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. I've heard of Palestine my whole life. It's in the Bible. And so I did a bunch of research on it. And so Palestine is for sure a thing, you know. Anyway, I was trying to get off this video, and now it's been like forever. So stop making me do it. Okay. Anyway, don't give up. Don't give up on life. Life can suck. Don't give up. Don't give up on your business. Think through it. Think through life. If life sucks, it'll get better. Think through it, make it better. Ask me questions, I'll tell you. The only complaint you'll have in the end of talking to me is that I have a tendency to go on and on and on. So ADHD, that's all of us that are like that. Hey, I love you guys. If I was a millionaire, I would give it all away. I'd never stay a millionaire. I'd probably end up giving it all away. If I ever win the lottery, I'm going to give you guys all money. So first off, send me some good vibes to win the lottery, because I'll help you out if you reach out. And like and subscribe my stuff. So I'm going to finish today with the two things, as always. Don't ever give up. Don't ever give up. I had a gun in my mouth once. I pulled it out. I didn't give up. I was in my 20s. I'm still here. The other thing is, love everybody. Love everybody. You walking by somebody on the sidewalk, take your sunglasses off. Yeah, you look cool with them, but take them off for a second. You see somebody, smile and nod. You know, it's a silent, how do you do? It's polite. It's courteous. That's a thing. You never know what that person's going through. And that one tiny thing that you just did was selfless. It's not going to help you. It's not something for you. It's something for them. But that's how goodness spreads. Somebody's in the store in line in front of you, and suddenly they realize, oh crap, my card doesn't work. I mismanaged my money or whatever. If you can afford to pay for theirs, fucking do it. I have done that so many times. You wouldn't believe the shock on people's face And it's not just them, it's everybody around you. Shocking how quick that catches on that somebody just did that. But I've never ever done it for that. I've done it because, honestly, it was pretty selfish. Usually it's so that they would get the fuck going and I could get my stuff checked through. I'm a dick, I know. But that little tiny thing of kindness right there spreads. It's karma. It's live by the sword, die by the sword, and the opposite. Live by the flower, die by the flower. Live by kindness, and you'll get kindness. Because it's mathematically proven. It's not some spiritual thing, in my opinion, at all. You want to have a kind town. Stop honking at people when you drive. You know, because they're pissing you off or they're taking too long at the light or whatever. You'll find yourself at the same light, and you know it. Dazed or texting or who knows what when somebody you're like, oh shit, sorry. But when you find somebody else there and you're behind them, you're pissed. Don't do that. Give them the same kindness you would give yourself. Give them the same kindness you would give somebody you love. Be kind. Be kind to your kids. Be kind to your spouse. Be kind to your mom and dad. Even when they're old and crusty and they're pissing you off or whatever, if that's the case, be kind. You have a choice to be all kinds of things. Why would you choose to be an asshole? It's not that funny. I know, and I hate to say it, in my sense of humor, sometimes it's funny. That's because I'm fucked up, okay? Being kind is so much better, though, and it does so many good things, you know? Spread that. Be kind. I wear a Black Lives Matter thing on my wrist. I don't do it so that everybody thinks, oh, what a nice guy. I do it because people need reminding. You know, when I go into Home Depot, people need reminding. Oh, that's another white guy. He's my age. He's older. And he thinks of Black Lives Matter. I guess they do. You know, and they're thinking about the jokes they were listening to at the bar the other night about black people or something. That's uncool. Stand up. Be courageous. Do the right thing. Do the right thing. Be kind. Help people out. Even if you really can't 100% afford it. That person in front of you in the line, they need that stuff. Be kind. Pay forward. Pay it forward. That's exactly the definition of when you're helping that person in front of you in the line at the store. Pay it forward. That means they'll do it at some point. Not every time. You won't do it every time. Do it once in a while. Try to do something kind more often than you do something shitty. Eventually that comes back to you because you've unpolluted your town. You ever seen on a river where you're picking up trash? That's unpolluting a river. Unpollute your shit. You know? Fix yourself. Unfuck yourself. Unfuck your town. Be kind. It spreads. Make sure it does. Do it a lot. You know? Anyway, that's it. I know you felt like you were never going to get out of here. It's like an hour. Okay, guys. I love you guys. Take it easy. Be good to yourselves and each other. And please like and subscribe my shit and comment.